Now, one of the proposals from the governor is the inventory tax. I just received something from the Baton Rouge Chamber, and they're opposed, as I appreciate it, they are opposed to changes in inventory tax. Is that the position of the Greater New Orleans Inc.?
Well, there's some nuance to it, and it's a bit of a complicated and awkward tax. On its face value, we don't like the inventory tax, and I'm sure our friends at BRAC don't like it either. We're unusual, one of only 2 or 3 states that tax people for the inputs of production. In theory, you're supposed to tax things you don't like cigarettes, and not tax things that you like inventory to build stuff in Louisiana. But the fact is that tax is there. And if you do simply as has been recommended by some people, and repeal the tax so that it goes away, what you're going to be doing is undermining the parishes, particularly the parishes on the river corridor that we celebrate, some of whom rely up to 40% of their ad valorem taxes on the inventory tax. And so you don't want to undermine the parishes for 2 reasons. One, of course, you don't want to take away their ability to run schools and police and firemen. But the other issue is that many of these parishes will have a legal requirement to then roll up their millages in order to meet their bond obligations. And so the counterintuitive impact is that for many of the companies that currently are getting reimbursed for the inventory tax, and so they're essentially cash neutral, if it went away, their taxes would actually go up because their property taxes would increase in those parishes. So simply getting rid of it is not a good solution. And then also what's been proposed about just repealing or taking back the rebate above the tax liability, that essentially would be a 400 and some odd million tax increase on business. I don't think that that's a good idea either. So you kind of get back to what BRAC is saying. I haven't seen the statement, but it's basically that it is an unorthodox tax. We don't like it, but getting rid of it, unwinding it, is more complex than simply repealing.
And at the same time, Louisiana higher education, where the worst case scenario, as I appreciate it, is roughly 82% cut this year. So if we do not say change the inventory tax, are we looking at 82% cut in higher education, or where's the compromise?
Well, the root problem is that we have a budget that has so many dedications, both constitutional and statutory, that we start out with a $29 billion budget, and at the end of the day have less than 10%, $2.8 billion that actually is discretionary, and that we can play with in the event of a deficit, and the majority of that is higher ed and healthcare, and that's why it gets cut. So at the structural level, we have to address that so that we're not left with the task of cutting, or the only option to be cutting higher ed and healthcare. But in the immediate term, we obviously have to come up with some solutions this current session in order to make up the deficit, because constitutionally we are required to do that. Now, we have a few ideas that we've heard about. Some of them are pretty straightforward, like freezing capital outlay or removing the quota or the CPI from the budget, effectively a forced savings of about $200 million. There are also some things on the revenue side, like, for example, we are going to be sponsoring some legislation to start collecting internet sales tax in Louisiana. It's not going to be so much in the first year. We think between $50 and $100 million, but it's going to get us in the right structural posture so that when the federal legislation passes, and it will pass sooner rather than later, Louisiana stands to gain this year $1.1 billion, and that number is going up about 15% every year. So that's something that we should do. There's some other things that need to be explored. For example, a tobacco tax, of course, is a way to get this taken care of for 1 year. I don't like the idea of bonding out the tobacco tax, which I've heard it seems reckless to create more debt to pay for the current debt. But certainly for a 1 year hit, $1 is about $300 million if you include smokeless tobacco and the vapor cigarettes that you so enjoy. Lots of shivers. And there's some stuff which is more unorthodox, like selling the Louisiana lottery, which has been done in a few other states like Florida, West Virginia, Arizona. That could get us close to $500 million. And some people are even talking about selling off the remaining 40% of the tobacco settlement, which would be a big chunk of money $750 million, although I think there's a lot of feeling that that might not be the wisest way to employ that future stream of revenue. So, my expectation is that we're going to figure a way to get through this session. And I think what's most important is two things. And there's kind of one segment that I ask you to keep in this buzz. It's that when we are addressing the $1.6 billion deficit, we first of all do not do something that's going to pull the rug out from underneath the very real private sector progress. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The second is that we don't do anything for 2015 that's going to further tie the hands of the governor in 2016. We don't want to make future promises that the next governor is not going to be making him or herself. And so I think if we abide by those two principles, the reality is that we're going to have to come up with some kind of ad hoc solution for this year, and then the next governor, the next legislature is going to have the critical task of doing the first major reform of our state budget, probably, Steve, since 1973 and Governor Roman.